Well, Charles, there we go. Another episode of Class Wars here on Sunday with Charles. People may remember our first episode of Class Wars. What was that one called?
Boy, it's been a while.
It's been a while. We should go back and check. And I apologize. I meant to repurpose. I think everyone watching knows you are a master of the Jedi arts when it comes to exposing the criminality of the Clinton cabal. Some of which are depicted in today's graphic here.
Oh, I mean, we can't just let that go. I mean, this is a tour de force. This could be your best graphic ever in the Sunday with Charles or closing in presentation. I mean, we should spend a bit of time explaining the nuances of this image, because even I am not all that aware of the significance of some of these. So,
well, it's interesting, you know, you and I, Charles, have settled into a good method of you come up with the creative ideas for which movie will be the theme, and then I apply a surprise graphic treatment. So we took a little bit of creative license with this original movie poster from Empire Strikes Back, because as most people will recall, Jabba the Hutt did not appear originally until Return of the Jedi. But of course, we've got Hillary depicted as the intergalactic gangster known throughout the galaxy and feared for her ruthless, brutal whatever, and her little pet sidekick here, Salacious Obama Crumb. People who remember the film will remember that rat-like creature hanging around at the feet. And of course, our Jedi Master right here, Charles Skywalker, riding the Tauntaun. We've got President Trump and the First Lady pictured in an embrace. Obviously, that was originally Han Solo and Princess Leia. And then the title treatment there, of course.
it's just magnificent. I don't know. I really wish we could do. We've got how many we've done at this point where we could do this.
Make a poster.
A poster of this and the many others that you've done. I mean, this really. Let's ask our viewers to email in their comments. I mean, and rank these. Do you think this is among the best, or would you like others more than this? But honestly, I think this is just a triumph.
Well, we'll see how the response goes. I've definitely been trying to offer some more graphic, images on the swag in the store on Redbubble.com. Not that many people buying the mugs. We've got the Podfather, of course. We can review those in a bit. But Charles, it's interesting. There are a couple of new video platforms that Crowdsource the Truth has been exploring. I don't know if you're aware of Mike Adams, the health ranger.
I'm not.
Well, yeah, Mike is a super nice guy he did the acoustic analysis in Las Vegas. So he's not just into health food and healthy medical alternatives to traditional medicine. Mike is also a scientist and very experienced in the truth movement. So he's created this alternative to YouTube called Real.video, and it's in beta right now. So I uploaded our classic Mrs. Bill cartoon. People can go to Real.video and see that appearance of Charles visiting with Mrs. Clinton, I should say Mrs. Bill, there in the Chappaqua Data Center, one of the all-time greats, of course. She's being grilled by Trey Gowdy and destroying evidence.
This actually was wonderful. I hope we can do more of these. I know that they're a labor of love for you, but I see so much potential in this.
Right. Well, we'll try to revisit the clay animation production in the future, but I definitely want people to be aware of Real.video. And of course, there is a new thing that Quinn Michaels and I were experimenting with last night, where in large part because we've come under such heavy fire from our detractors who want to try to derail our efforts here on Crowdsource the Truth, we wanted to take the video off of YouTube for some of the more sensitive material. I think a lot of these people are trying to do things, whether it's in public or online, to provoke me into making response videos that they can then attack in certain ways. So there's nothing, we're not making fun of anyone, we're not doing anything unprofessional or inappropriate, but we've learned from experience that there are certain types of videos that you can make that are just strike prone. And also, as a thank you to our many generous sponsors on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, Quinn and I did this very special members only live stream last night where we spoke a lot about some of the research that Quinn has done into this telecomics manifesto, which is essentially a rule book for how to attack people online, how to get involved in cryptocurrency, and how to do various things that are maybe not the nicest things to do. And so people who become sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth at patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, or sponsors of Quinn Michaels at patreon.com/Rahula Club can watch that exclusive live stream. And I think Quinn and I are going to experiment with doing more of those as we move forward, because I think the people that are sponsoring Crowdsource the Truth appreciate having some bonus material that they can look at.
That's a great idea. Great idea. And again, tour de force.
So without further ado, Charles, why don't we get right into the presentation, for today. Go back to page 1 here.
So what we like to try to do is to summarize the core messages we're going to get across in the first slide. And here it's important to remember that Donald Trump truly did win a mandate in November of 2016. People talked immediately about Bill Clinton winning a mandate in 1992 and in 1996. And I'd like to refresh people's recollections that in both of those two elections, in 92 and 96, Bill Clinton did not win a majority of the popular vote even. He barely beat his rivals because he had Ross Perot in both races.
I voted for Ross Perot.
Sorry?
I voted for Ross Perot, and I don't recall seeing maniacs in the street yelling about how Bill Clinton did not win the popular vote.
Exactly. Yeah, and another thing. But I thought that it was important to remind people when we think about what happens in presidential elections, in particular after Barack Obama won his historic victory in November of 2008, he was famously quoted early on in meetings with the Republicans, when they were starting to complain about things, just saying flatly, "We won, you lost, get over it." But that was his approach, and he just rammed through whatever he could ram through, certainly in his first and then even worse in his second term. So
Ram Emanuel.
Exactly. He pirouetted his way through things. But anyway, Donald Trump won in November 2016, and I think he is attracting more and more support because while he is a rich billionaire, he has never lost his ability to relate well to the average person and indeed the ordinary person on the street. He comes across as just somebody who speaks his mind. He's entitled to his opinions. He's been an adult for over 50 years at this point. And he's been through lots of challenges, lots of triumphs. And his most recent triumph, of course, was getting the nomination and beating somebody who had rigged the primaries and thought she'd rigged the election. I mean,
she was the most qualified candidate
ever, even
in her mind.
More so than Barack Obama, according to Barack Obama,
right,
for some strange reason. But so if we just could go back to the slide quickly.
Yes.
It's important to remember that Donald Trump is catering to the needs of what he perceives and his advisors perceive to be the forgotten men and women and children, frankly, in this country. Donald Trump is not trying to cater to the faculty lounge at Berkeley University or Yale, Harvard, Princeton, et cetera. That's not what he's trying to do. He is not trying to cater to the upper middle class bourgeoisie in the Upper West Side or in Greenwich Village or out in California and San Francisco or Los Angeles. That's not what he's trying to do. But unfortunately, you're not going to hear about his successes with a proper perspective because the media elites are controlled by the very people who cannot stand Donald Trump. To this day, they're still controlled by them. That's why I think what we're doing is beginning to get the kind of resonance that it's getting, not just in the United States, but around the world. We are able, by the technique you and I are using, where we comb through the news, we stay on top of the news. You're even more on top of the news than I am.
How is that possible?
No, because you're doing a lot more than I'm just focused on charity fraud. You're focused on lots of different things. And we're able to then synthesize what we think is important to the audience and get it out there. These slides were finished this morning at 10 o'clock. Try doing that on Meet the Press or Fox News Sunday or any of the major cable TV or network shows. You can't do that.
Right.
So,
well, they wouldn't even allow you to talk about most of this stuff.
Right, and so we're trying to do it we don't try to lecture people and say, you should think this because I think this. No,
Right.
We're exposing to you, the viewers, facts and evidence that you can consider and turn over in your own minds, reach your own conclusions, but we're trying to help you, guide you to information that you're not going to see in the mainstream.
Right. And Charles, I do want to take this opportunity to remind some of our new viewers, we're over 61,000 regular subscribers on YouTube right now. And for people who are not yet following Charles Ortel on Twitter, he is at Charles Ortel. And the question I would ask is, where the hell have you been if you're not following Charles or going to charlesortel.com for all of the latest information that Charles is posting on there. There's one other thing I forgot to mention, Charles. I've also been conducting an experiment recently where people who want to watch the daily live streams on the 21st Century 3D YouTube channel, which is an alternate YouTube channel where we are simultaneously live streaming all of the live streams on the Jason Goodman Crowdsource the Truth channel. People can go there and watch the same live streams they see, but if you'd like to financially support Crowdsource the Truth through Super Chat, that's been enabled here on the 21C3D YouTube channel. So I'd like to leave that option open for people if they should choose to exercise it. And I apologize for taking up that time there, but wanted to let people know, of course.
So, I'm not done with that one.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Sorry.
So, I think what the mainstream media does not want to admit, but which we see in our daily lives, and I see scanning across the internet and then the alternative media, is that more and more Americans of all former political stripes, be they hard left, Berniacs, hard left period, right wing, center of the road, not interested in politics, whatever, more and more people are increasingly impressed with the fact that Donald Trump as a candidate said a whole bunch of things and now has a very long list of accomplishments. And the man has not even been president of the United States for 2 years yet. And every day, this guy is out there, his team is out there trying to identify the real problems that affect and hurt people of every political persuasion who happen to be American, and to shine a light on those problems, get people, fresh minds, to consider solutions to these problems, and not just talk about problems endlessly. So you can say, you're for fighting hunger, you're for fighting this, He's actually trying to get people fed, get people employed, get people safe. And you're seeing a relentless assault on the traditional way of conducting business. You're seeing disruption happen before your eyes, and you're actually seeing winning. So what Donald Trump, this political neophyte, and I love the way, the never Trumpers, whether it's Steve Hayes, the Weekly Standard, who's a nice enough guy, but he's a never Trumper, or Max Shoe or Boot or whatever that guy's name is, who's another never Trumper, or all these people, he's a neophyte. He doesn't. Really? What has this gentleman done in less than 2 years? He's got the Democratic Party, the leadership of the Democratic Party, advocating to turn the United States into Venezuela as Venezuela melts down before us. He got recently, in the last 24 hours, Barack Obama's, I didn't like him when he was Homeland Security Cabinet head, Jay Johnson, who's certainly not a Republican,
right?
Worked in the Obama cabinet forever, defended Obama forever, writing an op-ed in the the Washington Post, saying that it is not a serious idea to dismantle ICE.
I agree. That's not a serious
It's an absurd idea, but here you have, Liawatha, whatever her name is, Warren, and you've got that idiot Kristen Gillibrand and others, and Cynthia Nixon, who should stick to acting.
Oh, not even.
Right, yeah, not even, right. Getting up there and try to, binding the Democratic Party to the policy of stupid.
Yes.
I mean, it really is a stupid idea,
Yes.
and I don't say that as any kind of political expert. So here's this Donald Trump guy, and everyone says, oh, you shouldn't tweet, that's really bad. Well, it's kind of working pretty well.
Yeah.
You shouldn't do too many things at once. Well, it's a lot better than spending all your time being a bad golfer, which is what Obama did when he wasn't on vacation,
Right.
for a lot of his tenure. So I think what we're seeing here, particularly in the summer period, and I'm assuming that Donald Trump has, if you had ordinary security, he's got security to the nth degree. I really hope for his safety and his family and everybody's safety. But you're seeing a person of more than 70 years old work for the United States of America for free, donating his entire, no baloney, donating all of his salary to charities as he's president. And you're seeing this gentleman work 7 days a week. And I love these people who say, well, he's out golfing. You have no clue how hard this guy is working. And beyond that, he doesn't seem to be somebody who, plays the part of being a president, who shows up with, perfectly dressed and with a smile on his face and then just utters platitudes and goes off into closed meetings. No, this guy will face down the media, face down his opponents, engage on substance, and he's clearly very much of a special human being. Now, we may disagree, some of us, with this position or that position or this portion of his history, but you have to admit that he came in with having been dealt a bad hand. Maybe it wasn't as bad a hand as George W. Bush dealt Obama. I'll grant Obama.
You mean how crappy the government was when he started?
Well, structural, gigantic deficits, huge debt, international crises all over the place, sluggish growth, an idea sold by Barack Obama and others in the Democratic Party that we should just be happy with 1.5% GDP growth, which is a disaster. And he had to, get through all the landmines. He was immediately assaulted by the deep state. He still is assaulted by the deep state. There's this witch hunt triggered by Mueller. Generations of Washington, D.C. elites and other elites are fighting him at every turn, all these entrenched judges. And he's not just fighting Democrats. He's fighting the Bush wing, the Romney wing.
Deep state.
The Romney wing or the Romney wing. I guess I got that wrong. So this is something that I think, as we watch the summer take shape and we watch what Donald Trump's strategy is, people who are talking about the blue wave, better be thinking about, standing up and waving at a Yale game because Yale's colors are blue. There's not going to be any blue wave in this election.
You're waving by.
See ya. Especially if Donald Trump continues. I understand in the Wisconsin rally that he held, they did a study of that. May or may not be true, but the rally consisted of many, many erstwhile Democrats and independents. And, just speaking as somebody who reads voraciously about politics and other issues, the Republican Party, if it manages to solidify the Reagan coalition of centrist Democrats, if it manages to reach out and deliver, as it continue delivering for minorities and for women, if it engages with independents, if it somehow grabs the youth who are called millennial, but I think are increasingly dissatisfied with bearing a heavy student loan burden, not finding the kind of remunerative work that we got when we got out of college at least I got out many decades ago. This could be a real game changer. This 2018 election could end up being, monumentally more harmful to the resistance and to the Clinton, Obama, Biden, Pelosi, Warren, geriatric wing of the Democratic Party.
So people should definitely be looking into who's running for Congress in their district and
Absolutely.
Get out and vote.
Well, or even consider. I mean, it might be too late to register to run, but people need to get a lot more engaged, and we're getting engaged.
You and I? Yo, I didn't know.
No, in politics.
Where's the ring?
Sorry.
Had to do that.
And
right?
with that, I think we'll go to the next slide.
Yeah, well, Charles, one other thing I wanted to bring up, I'm sorry to keep interjecting, but also I'm not that sorry. We were in Chicago just the other day with the Becks and Robin Gritz, and I did a video about Barack Obama's Chicago Cash Bonanza. I just sort of walked around the neighborhood where they're going to be building the Barack Obama Library and Museum, and I certainly didn't know much of anything about this until you brought it to my attention, but I spoke to some people there in the neighborhood, people ranging from, obviously successful professionals down on to homeless people who told me their concerns. Some people were pleased that the library was coming in there, going to increase their property values. Other people, this woman spoke about her frustration just with the system overall, and she said that Donald Trump people should listen to what she said. She seemed not terribly positive on Donald Trump, but said that he was exposing the system, which I watched it again, and I wasn't sure if what she meant by that was he was exposing that rich people control the system, or if he was exposing corruption. But it was a pretty meaningful conversation that I had with her, and I would definitely encourage people to go back into the Crowdsource the Truth archives of just, I think, 2 days ago and take a look at that to see what that woman had to say. Jo Wheeler was her name.
Yeah, I mean, as we've discussed before, that whole, well, if we can stay on this slide.
Yep.
Yeah, the whole Obama library project is a disaster.
It's very suspicious.
Well, it's a disaster. I mean, it was not organized. It was organized in part for religious purposes. Now, what? You list out your tax-exempt purposes, and one of them is religious.
Whoa.
It is not a religious organization. It should never have been approved in the way that it was approved.
And
it
what
is never,
religion?
Who knows? Obamanism. I don't know, but Barackism. But it's just it's really, as I have written in articles, as I've given interviews on this subject, much as I disagree with almost every part of Barack Obama's economic policies, which I think couldn't have been more misguided, I nevertheless feel that he is a remarkable historical figure whose life needs to be studied in context and whose presidential records need to be examined.
Including his birth certificate.
Well, not so much only that, but no, the presidential records are the records created or received during his 2 terms as president. Those records, we don't even know where they are.
That's crazy.
At this point. And his foundation is given numerous statements where they're not going to actually house the physical records. That is not permitted under the existing statute, the Presidential Libraries Act of 1986 as amended. It's just not permitted. It's not contemplated in their Articles of Incorporation. So we won't go off on a rant on the Obama Foundation today. We'll save that for another cheery day. But I think, particularly for our newer viewers and for those who don't want to remember these important caveats that we cite that apply to everything we say on the show, we live in the United States of America, and we're broadcasting from the United States of America, where thankfully we do have a First Amendment right. We're exercising that right. We're doing it we're not just 2 guys with, what is that popular show on YouTube, the most popular show, with iPie or something like that? Or
PewDiePie?
PewDiePie. I mean, that you're not going to get that on this show. But what instead you're getting is really a narrated tour through issues that you really should care about and you should get your friends engaged upon, because what has been happening beneath the surface of the attention of the average American voter and under the guise of these supposed expert regulators, state, federal, foreign level, is the largest set of unprosecuted frauds in history.
Yeah.
And these frauds need to be prosecuted. They better be fully investigated, and the people behind them better get brought to account. Otherwise, we have an unequal system of justice where Corinne Brown rots in prison for 5 years as a 71-year-old African American who may or may not be a sympathetic creature, but nonetheless is in federal prison for 5 years over her role in an $800,000 fraud. This other Steve Stockman, who's a conservative Republican from Texas, he's going to prison probably, we don't know for how long, over a $1.2 million charity fraud. He'll be going to federal prison. And meanwhile, these Clintons and the people who support the Clintons and the people who've obstructed investigations, numerous investigations of the Clinton Foundation fraud, going all the way back to 2001, those people either are involved. Mueller was one of the people who missed the original fraud when he was head of the FBI from September 2001 until September 2013. And Rosenstein apparently missed it. Comey missed it. How many people in the IRS missed it? How many people, these state attorney generals missed it? The House missed it. The Senate missed it. These international players have all missed it. And so what we're giving to you in this presentation today is a window into some new facts and evidence that hopefully will get people even more excited to push Donald Trump, push his people along, to bring these crooked fraudsters to justice.
Yeah, and Charles, who else seems to be not going to federal prison is Imran Awan. We mentioned all these issues with Corinne Brown. I'm personally a little bit irritated that it seems like Imran is going to escape.
Are you cheesed off about that?
I'm cheesed off. I think everyone should be very concerned. And they can check out some of the videos I did last week or during this week all about that. But a lot of people have been saying, the plea agreement is only talking about Washington, D.C. It seems quite clear that that is where the most serious crimes took place, and that everything surrounding this Imran Awan case indicates that he is going to be allowed to go with a minimum sentence, if there is any kind of prison sentence at all. And there is no indication whatsoever that Imran Awan is acting as a state's witness or turning over any evidence or anything like that. So
we will see. That would disappoint many people.
We will see.
Including me. So if we just hit this playlist, because I like to do that.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Time to time.
Playlist is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and I guess this would now be our 86th video since in 11 months.
That's pretty good.
Or in 10 months, actually.
Yeah.
And what were you saying, Jason, about the viewership all in for the channel?
Right. Well, this week, Crowdsource the Truth surpassed 61,000 regular subscribers, and I think the more interesting metric is that cumulatively, we've got nearly 13 million video views, which is quite a lot. I've been looking around at some other YouTube channels. Some, in many cases, have been around for years and years, and that's a pretty big number. Not that many channels achieving 13 million views. So when we stop and think about who's trying to prevent me from continuing with this work, I think that those numbers tell quite a story.
It's good, and for the new viewers, we have yet to curate all of those, this entire inventory, because it's a lot of work to go back and remember everything that we have said. But I don't think we've been repeating ourselves yet, and that's testament to the gigantic nature of this fraud. I mean, people came to me. I remember in the beginning when I got into this. To exposing fraud for the first time with General Electric, which, by the way, look what happened to General Electric. It got kicked out of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. It's the only original component of the Dow Jones average. It's now gone.
Whoa.
Only remaining one. And when I got into that, I remember people telling me, that's too big a mess. Nobody will ever go after it. Those are the messes I like to attack, because the ones that are too big are the ones that people just feel will never get sorted out. Well, GE, I think, has already been sorted out, and it's about to get really sorted out.
What's going to happen to GE? The stock's just tumbled, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the stock has never recovered from the levels where, when I started on it, was at 40.
And now?
Now it's around 13. And that's a long time ago. I mean, that was when I first got involved in it. When I first got involved, it was actually February, March 2007. When I made a public call against it was August of 2007. And then it was about 40.
Wow.
So, and similarly with this Clinton Foundation thing, when I have had the privilege, as I regularly now get the privilege, to go on radio or go on television or whatever, I never get the amount of time that you really need to lay this out to the investigators and prosecutors, because it is so complex. And it's easy to understand once you get into it, but there's a lot of material here. Ultimately, I think, and we had that great show, we have to get him back on, Doug White. Ultimately, I think that the Clinton Foundation and its various false front, Robin Hood and reverse charities will become the subject of multiple PhD, master's, theses, and books. And
what did you say? Feces?
I did not say that, Jason. It's what you did.
Sorry.
That's all right.
There's no shortage of comedic material that you can go to. Sorry, that's a little lowbrow.
That's
I don't
all
need to
right.
do
But
that.
we do have a diarrhea expert in the mix, so it's fair enough to bring that up. But
I should have integrated Chelsea. She could have been maybe Boba Fett.
well, there's plenty of room for her.
Okay,
So let's, without any further ado,
yes,
or do, we can go. So, there's been a certain amount of tolerance, I think, evidenced on, this site, this show, for the long delays that that Donald Trump has faced in his efforts to get to the bottom of what the hell actually happened in the 2016 election. But we learned recently that the DOJ is now refusing to come forward with information that has long been sought. And at a certain point, you look at these people, knowing that Rod Rosenstein, is so conflicted here.
Yeah.
You look into the backgrounds of his wife, you look into his own, we've been through this ad nauseum. Christopher Wray was on the Enron task force with Mueller, and Sidney Powell is, I think, a very objective, seasoned lawyer who's written a book, License to Lie, exposing the absurdity of that Enron task force, in which Wray centrally figured. You got these two bozos at this point, standing up there and still, in my mind, obstructing the deep dive that is necessary, that is called for, and that will ultimately happen.
Yeah.
And the only reason you would do something like this in June, July 2018 is you're part of a plan where what you're trying to do is stall for time, hope they can drop a gigantic bunch of stink balls in October, October surprises, and maybe tip the elections in November to a place where one or both chambers of the House, or the House or the Senate, flip to the Democrats. That's got to be the game that these people are playing. They're stalling for time. They're hoping against hope that they can play out this Hail Hillary, or not Hail Mary, Hail Hillary approach through November of 2018. And it's really past time, I think, for Donald Trump to put his feet down and say, no, okay,
Yeah.
I have a right as president. I've directed my people to study this information. They have studied this information, and I've given them authority. And I'm asking you, Mr. President, for a small favor as you go on your trip abroad. Please just peremptorily declassify as much of this information as possible so that Rosenstein and others cannot hide behind the sources and methods crap and these dubious arguments that they use to keep information held back and redacted from the public. The American public has earned a right to know how deep this deep state cabal goes, who's involved in it, and we need to see all of the documents that pertain as soon as possible to how this Mueller investigation got started. What was the legal rationale for appointing Mueller? On what evidence did it rest? What crimes were seen at the time he was appointed? Where's the supporting memoranda? Where's the evidence? Who was involved to creating this evidence? If Peter Strzok was anything to do with it, or any of this inside group had anything to do with this, then this whole exercise has been a complete waste of time. And we shouldn't just stop there. We shouldn't say, well, it's a waste of time, and let's see the basis upon which warrants were sworn out before judges. Let's see why Mueller was established, what latitude he was given by whom. And if this is a gigantic, banana republic attempt to sabotage a duly elected president, then the people engaged in that banana republic attempt need to spend time in a not very pleasant prison.
Charles, weren't they supposed to release all those documents by 5 o'clock on Friday?
They did not do it.
And then, so no repercussions there. And I have something interesting to share with you. I was speaking with Robin Gritz, and she told me that she and several other FBI agents, some active who she still knows, were looking for like graduation photos of Peter Strzok, and I forget the language that she used, but certain documents that indicate when you began and how you moved up through the FBI. None of that is there. So my question becomes, you know, Robin, of course, was a liaison between the FBI and the CIA, and with the Joint Terrorism Task Forces and all the things that happened after September 11th, very probably, obviously, under Robert Mueller's supervision, we've got this sort of cross-pollination between these three-letter agencies, some of which are very much more secretive than the FBI, which itself is pretty secretive. My question is Peter Strzok some sort of deep state insert into the FBI to control these types of secretive things and do sort of extra FBI stuff that maybe isn't in our best interest?
Well, yeah, and how in the hell does this guy still collect a paycheck, still have a security clearance?
Right.
I mean, the guy, I'm sure he's the exception, that there are many, many fine men and women in the FBI and other three-letter agencies. But, you know, what we know so far about this bozo is so outrageous, including this latest thing that just came out, that apparently he failed a polygraph test on the 16th of January.
Wait a minute.
It's a different one.
Yeah, why did that?
That sort of trio. He failed a polygraph test on the 16th of January 2016. Now this is very, very significant for those of you who have difficulty remembering why these dates are significant. In January of 2016, we don't yet know the date, but a senior State Department official sent evidence directly to James Comey early in January saying, hey, I think this whole thing with Hillary Clinton is kind of serious. I'd like to speak to you, Comey, dopey James Comey, and take you through what's really going on over here at the State Department. And he gets no response, no confirmation that dopey James Comey's received anything. And then January 27th, 2016, this senior State Department employee walks in unannounced to the Washington field office and says, hey, you know, what the hell's going on here with dopey James Comey? He's not answering my phone calls. This is serious. Do you have the security clearance required? Let's go into a skiff.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you what's really happening. And just around this same time, January 27, 2016, in those 2-3 days through the end of the month, the top investigator, Mr. Giacalone, I think, if I'm pronouncing his name improperly, forgive me, sir, but he resigns, and McCabe gets put in as deputy director of the FBI on February 1st, 2016. So the fact that Strzok would flunk a polygraph test 16th of January in this precise time frame,
it's amazing,
and still be involved not only in the fake Hillary investigation, but then in the fake Trump investigation. I mean, it's impossible to explain the contrast in approaches here. That with Hillary, it's like, oh, Madam President, yes, we understand that you are the worst criminal ever to occupy a cabinet position in terms of the way in which you don't even bother handling classified information. But because you're going to be the next president of the United States, it's written. It has been written. The glass ceiling has been shattered, and you're going to do it. You know, we're just not, we're going to break every protocol that exists, and we're just going to let you off the hook, not even with a wrist slap.
Yeah, you know? and particularly at this time when cybersecurity has become such a massive concern, possibly the biggest national security concern, she is probably the worst candidate as far as cybersecurity goes that we've ever seen.
Well, and you think about it, it's not like she has the excuse, I'm a neophyte to politics, I've never been involved in the political stage. I mean, this person has been running for office effectively ever since she gave her valedictory joke speech where she humiliated an African-American senator, destroyed the graduation for quite a few people at Wellesley. Ever since then, she's had her eye in self-aggrandizement and being a public, in quotes, servant, taking as much as possible for herself on the side. And she lived in the White House for 8 years. She was a senator.
Stole a lot of furniture from them.
She was supposed to oversee, as a senator, many branches, many parts of the executive, branch, and she certainly should have been fully conversant not only with classification approaches, but with
What the letter C stands
it's,
for?
it's just the third letter of the alphabet. Do you get A? Did you understand A? Well, anyway, but so here's somebody who doesn't really have credibility to say that she's living with a philanderer who's around the world, right, on Epstein Island, flying on all these private planes with all these women all over the place. Who knows what he really has been up to? And she, the bright bulbs on the Clinton side say, what we're going to do, with our nation's top secrets, we'll house them in a whatever it was, a closet in Chappaqua, where we've got all these unvetted people working in that mansion complex. Who knows how many of those unvetted people and their relatives were printing out classified materials so that Hillary could have a hard copy, or Bill could have a hard copy, in between his bouts with the Energizer Bunny. I mean, that's in Chappaqua. Then the same thing down in Washington, D.C. You can't say in this day and age that the Clintons didn't know what they were doing was intentionally wrong. You can't say that they didn't understand what they were trying to do was evade the scrutiny so that they could concoct all these crooked deals using their crooked Clinton charity.
It's amazing.
It's obvious that's what they were doing.
And it's amazing that the mainstream conversation hasn't even gotten to that yet. To them, what's obvious is that Russia colluded. Didn't Mitch McConnell tell, he was on Fox this morning, he said that Trump needs to call out Putin for Russian meddling in the election.
Yeah, that's a good move. Yeah.
It's absurd.
On Mitch McConnell, I'll just say, I'm very disappointed with Mitch McConnell. I will not use the epithet that I would use for Mitch McConnell, and I don't think
it's the second letter of the alphabet that Hillary should understand.
It could just be. It's not one of the last few letters there that might begin with a W, but I'm very disappointed with him, and I regard him really as wholly ineffective rhino. So then we think about this whole idea, the fair way for people to have some balance. And Cheryl Atkinson, I think, was one who pioneered this idea of put the shoe on the other foot. When we think about Hillary Clinton's alleged misdeeds, if Donald Trump had done what Hillary Clinton is alleged to have done, do we think the mainstream press would let him off the hook?
No.
If he takes all the nation's secrets, he puts them in a server above the Gucci store at Trump Tower, next to some.
Might be more secure than her bathroom in
Probably
Chappaqua.
could be, yeah. But here we have, you look at this case. Contrast Hillary Clinton, who's not even remotely on bail, right? Who was the subject of a very large and significant FBI investigation that began on July 10th, 2015, and that by February 2016 had determined that Hillary Clinton had mishandled 2,115 pieces of classified information. I was just going through my notes this morning looking over this stuff, and that's in that Hillary R. Clinton dump file, FBI vault file. Multiple different ways they talk about that. Okay, so she's the actual subject of an FBI investigation, she and her team. That investigation, I would argue, has still not been resolved, still is open, and that's something that's recent, that has to do with the period 2016 when she was running for office.
This is
right?
years ago, this stuff with Paul Manafort, right?
And as we said in the beginning, what's the basis for Mueller to investigate Manafort? Who decided there was a crime? You don't, in this country, in theory, you don't say, I'm the Attorney General and I'm going to investigate Jason Goodman. No, you find evidence of a crime first, and then you investigate the people. Show me how that worked with Manafort, and why is this guy being kept, why is it fair to have him kept in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day?
That's crazy.
Before his trial, when Hillary Clinton is allowed in this mishandling, this is a personal set of errors, alleged errors, right? Failure to pay taxes, this and that, with his business. What Hillary was doing was exposed all of us in this country to multiple foreign actors who meant us no good deeds by the crazy decision to house 100% of her Secretary of State business on a non-secure server and to use non-secure electronic devices.
Yeah.
That's bizarre. You look at Hillary, She's still, flying around, going to East Hampton, doing whatever she wants to do, collecting speech fees,
Yeah,
writing
New
books,
Zealand.
getting paid for all that. And here's Manafort, who I don't particularly like, by the way.
Right.
But nonetheless, it's just not fair. You're innocent until proven guilty. And do we seriously believe that, this guy should be in solitary confinement for allegedly trying to tamper with the process when Bill Clinton, we now learn, Bill Clinton meets Loretta Lynch on the tarmac, not by accident, as we were told during the campaign,
Right.
but in moves that were planned and coordinated by the FBI and the Department of Justice. So it's just, you look at these two cases and I look at it and I say, under Donald Trump, who's the President of the United States, we have not gotten the Justice Department into the place where it should be, where justice is blind, justice is objective, justice is still not being carried out the way it needs to be carried out in this country after 8 long years sinking into the mud under Obama and previously under George W. and Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush. We need to rewrite the scales of justice and, putting these two things into sync. If you're going to go actively, you're going to go raid Paul Manafort, and his family 5 o'clock in the morning. I don't think any Clinton should be safe right now.
Well,
I think they should be raided in Chappaqua, in New York, in Washington, D.C., up in Boston, in the office of Boston, these Clinton Foundation offices, all need to be raided, and the same standards need to be applied.
I think there's a broader issue here, Charles, because even if people hate Paul Manafort, here's someone who has engaged in let's say he did it deliberately, financial crimes. Why is that solitary confinement? That's for dangerous people who are murderers and disrupting and causing riots in the prison. To me, this seems quite clearly like a psychological torture tactic being used to display to people like Michael Cohen.
Exactly.
You don't want to be in solitary confinement.
It's outrageous.
And it brings me back to the notion that, this guy who, with the help of his attorney, has been allowed to skate, Imran Awan, who could have been secreting information, very sensitive national security information to associates in Pakistan or elsewhere that very well might have resulted in things like, or even the very action that killed SEAL Team 6 aboard that Chinook helicopter in Afghanistan many years ago. And he's just basically walking away. No solitary confinement for Imran Awan. It's quite shocking.
No soup for him.
No soup for him. Yeah, that's right.
So if we return to the slides, now this guy, John Brennan.
Your favorite.
I'm sorry. I appreciate that George H.W. Bush was head of the CIA and ultimately, very quickly thereafter, became vice president and president. So CIA leaders do get involved in politics.
Well,
but
they're not supposed to, are they?
Not while they're head of the CIA, they're not supposed to be. But this guy, it would be one thing if Brennan had a record that was just pristine.
Right.
This is a record of filth. You go back, here's a guy who, in the late 70s or whatever it was, seriously decided to experiment with joining the Communist Party. He's a guy who then, was involved in the CIA in Saudi Arabia. We don't know on which team in Saudi Arabia. He may well have found himself very close to the people who were hanging upside down from the hotel there after the sword dance episode.
Al-Walid.
Al-Walid. He may be an Al-Walid ally.
Right.
But he's a guy who converted to Islam from Roman Catholicism. Now that's, the number of white males who do that is probably a pretty low number of people. And, people have different religious views, all for that. But, this is not any old person. This is somebody who, under Obama, we need to go back through the history of how exactly, for what crimes did, what was the fellow who, Petraeus. Remember, Petraeus was bounced out of the CIA for mishandling classified information.
Right.
In his own travel schedule, somehow his lover got a copy of that, and she shouldn't have had it. I mean, does that sound as serious to you as operating 100% of the nation's business on secret servers and closets and crazy-ass places around the country, and then flying around the world and using unsecure devices to log onto this porous system? Which sounds worse to you? Petraeus gets bounced. Hillary, is still whining about not being president of the United States.
Right. I mean, they both sound pretty bad to me. There was something strange going on with David Petraeus, in my view, that we still don't fully know what happened. He, of course, is it KKR now, which is also very strange to me. One of these private investment firms that's very possibly, funding the wars of people like Sidney Blumenthal and.
Oh no, I wouldn't. KKR is a leveraged buyout specialist firm.
They're doing something screwy. You got Eric Braverman's husband working for that firm.
Well, right, but that's more of the KKR is one of the foremost leveraged buyout firms. They pioneered in modern times the use of the leveraged buyout.
Why do they have Petraeus there?
Because you get to a certain point. They've bought so many companies at this point that it's always fun to put a general on the board, and
And why is Eric Braverman's husband there as well?
We don't know much about his professional qualifications. It could well be Eric Braverman has strong professional qualifications, and he married somebody who's probably pretty smart. And this is a guy in their institute.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I don't trust any of these guys.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, I don't mean to take you off course
okay.
there, Charles.
That's all right. So we head back in.
Of course, I should reiterate that my views do not necessarily reflect Charles's views.
It's all right. It's okay. So then we have, let's see, what's next? So yeah, Perkins Coie, it's turned out. And here what I think we should do is hit the second link. Yeah, this is, I believe, by the great Thomas Lifson, who's somebody who's, I guess was in charge of the Whole American Thinker, but when I send articles into them, he's the one who does phenomenal editing for me. But he's absolutely right here. This attack on Jim Jordan and the role of Perkins Coie coordinating this attack. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that the 2016 election, for me, calls into focus the fact that there really is no effective regulator for law firms. That you can go to Yale Law School, as Hillary and Bill did, and you can decide that you're not going to respect the law, and then you hide behind the law. And you say, well, I'm a lawyer, and my conversations with my clients are confidential. And how in the hell was Perkins Coie so centrally involved, both in Bob Bauer, who's now no longer there, but Bob Bauer was White House counsel, who resigned suddenly when they came up with the electronic version of Barack Obama's birth certificate, which somebody flew to Hawaii to get. I could have saved them however much money that cost.
Emailed the PDF.
Like, yeah, it works that way. Even I understand that. But no, I guess the lady wanted some air miles or something, so they fly her all the way out there. She returns with the thing, flounces it in.
Didn't she die?
No, she did not die.
Someone died, really.
No, the birth certificate lady, the Secretary of State in Hawaii, died under mysterious circumstances. Yeah. But the thing with Perkins Coie is that this fellow, Bauer, who was married to Anita Dunn, who used an alias and had to be bounced out and was a member of the Communist Party, still married to that lady. And here we have this firm tied to Obama and tied to many questionable activities.
Yeah.
And tied, the partner was centrally involved, it would seem, organizing the bid rigging strategy or the primary rigging strategy of Hillary Clinton and this crazy approach of the way they solicited in multiple states, ostensibly for the state committees, but in reality channeling the money to Hillary exclusively, rigging the primaries, rigging the superdelegates, all that. Perkins Coie centrally involved in all that. And now they're going to be taking on Jim Jordan. I mean, here's a note to the other side. There are a few other law firms out there, and if you don't want to be so suspicious, you might consider using more than one law firm to be involved in all these crazy activities.
Well, but I guess when you need, a criminal attorney, perhaps your choices are limited.
Yeah, it's frankly deplorable.
I agree.
Who is the managing partner of this place, I wonder?
I was looking at that, so I wanted to firm overview, I guess. It's
management.
strange. Yeah, I would think that would, there we go.
John Devaney. I mean, ladies and gentlemen of Perkins Coie, it's not clear to me that you are above the law. And to the extent that what your people are doing, you've got rogue elements who are attempting to obstruct an investigation, legitimate investigations into charity fraud, into campaign fraud, into money laundering, into bank fraud. That is not a place. Law firms do go out of business when they get on the wrong side of a conspiracy.
Right.
And I think it would be time for me, if I were John Devaney, if he's the management committee chair, I would be asking some very tough questions of the people who remain at Perkins Coie tied to all of these scandals.
And certainly, if we've learned anything from the Michael Cohen incident, lawyers can also go to jail. So they should be careful what they choose. Wait, Mary Moynihan. I recognize the name Moynihan.
Well, it's a pretty common name.
It is, but anytime I see those common names, I don't know, is she...
I'm sure she's a fine individual.
No, I'm not accusing her of anything, but we should see if she's related to any other Moynihans we might be aware of. Just saying. Asking for a friend, Charles.
All right. So yeah, we remember the "Shut Your Mouth, German Hillary" slide. But I mean, the attitude that I think people in the elite media and the resistance had is that Donald Trump was going over to Europe or Canada to meet with his masters at the G7. And I think, as you think about the political positions in each of the countries that comprise the G7 today, I would venture to say that Donald Trump's position, tenuous as some may think it is with the Mueller investigation and process, is a lot stronger than the political position, let's say, of Theresa May. And that article is worth taking a quick look at.
Yes.
Donald Trump is on his way next week. He's over to the UK and Scotland. Next one, yeah. But Theresa May's standing here looks a little bit shaky to me. And I think it's past time when we consider what's been going on here with the Christopher Steele matter and with all these suspect ties between Clinton supporters and Obama supporters in the UK who appear to be trying to gang tackle and bring down Donald Trump. I think it's fair for people who like to do investigating to start taking a real deep dive into the May government, particularly into Theresa May herself and her husband, to try to examine...
Wackenhut.
Is he involved with Wackenhut?
I believe so.
So, but nonetheless, there's this elite in the UK that is all in for globalism. It is all in for looking down its collective set of noses at Donald Trump the Rube. It's all in for encouraging hostilities between Russia and the United States to increase the relevance, frankly, of each of the other remaining G7 countries in their ties with us. And it's time to look a lot more critically at what these people were doing, particularly from 2015 to 2016. When we go into that Hillary R. Clinton dump that I referred to, that's now up to, I think, 22 sections, there's several mentions to meetings that happened between FBI agents and their counterparts at the embassy, the undisclosed embassy, which I suspect is the British embassy in the UK, which is a very beautiful embassy. So it's really time, I think, to get back into this, and I hope Donald Trump people are really aggressively looking at this.
Charles, you just mentioned the embassies, and it brings me back to something that Kevin Shipp had mentioned to me about a week ago, that he had discovered a cyber breach that was basically present in every single U.S. embassy. And when he brought it to the attention of his superiors there at the CIA, they ruined his life. And you would think I don't know what was going on with the embassies, but you mentioned embassies, and that just sort of stuck in my mind as something interesting.
And you're referring, of course, to this gentleman?
Yes.
Does he have a book outstanding?
He's got a book called From the Company of Shadows. And speaking of outstanding, Kevin is an outstanding guy. Super nice, I have to say.
Is his book for sale, or is he just...
His book can be purchased on Amazon.com, or actually even better than Amazon.com. If you want to purchase his book, you can go to fortheloveoffreedom.net, and Kevin's book has a secret code in it that I do believe you only get if you purchase it directly from his website, fortheloveoffreedom.net, and that code reveals certain information in the book that the CIA would have surely redacted. So that's a very interesting thing, and definitely want to encourage people to support Kevin Shipp. He is a true champion of freedom, and he's been through the deep state ringer in ways that most other people can only have nightmares about.
So before we get into the real depth on the Clinton Foundation frauds, and there are new aspects we want to expose today, we need to point out that it does appear from media accounts that the North Koreans are backsliding already, and that's disappointing.
It is.
And on the one hand, Mike Pompeo is making light of these comments and talking a big game about how he can't care about all the negative comments that are out there. But I think what I see here is that China is on its heels with the tariff assault, with the undeniable fact that China needs exports into the United States far more than we need to invest more money in China or try to penetrate the internal, undeveloped, frankly, small Chinese market. So China's on its heels over these tariffs, and every time China seems to suffer in trade or investment discussions, or for that matter, strategic talks about the islands and stuff like that in Taiwan, they wind up Kim to give us a hard time. And I think we need to sort of get both of them in a room and say, listen, President Xi, great relationship with Donald Trump, and Chairman Kim, that's all fantastic stuff. We'll take you both on at the same time. You have a problem in China. You've got a gigantic investment bubble. You've got a rigged set of markets. You've got bum financials for your companies. You don't have a mature market yet. You probably have too much debt. We're not worried about the Chinese spiking our treasury market. They have a lot more to worry about, because it's a lot tougher to keep control over 1.3 billion people when you have only 150 million in the Chinese Communist Party than it is for Donald Trump to make sure that there's order in the United States of America. So I think that it's time. I think what Donald Trump is doing here is from a position of strength at the moment, taking on China and North Korea at the same time. But Rocket Man better get the message here, because Donald Trump was out there, Mike Pompeo and John Bolton have been laying ground here to give a bright future for the people of North Korea. But if Donald Trump is not going to suffer this kind of foolish BS.
Charles, would you say that this is maybe a diplomatic learning lesson for President Trump to not come out saying, hey, I solved the North Korea problem before the chicken has hatched?
Yeah, I think the hyperbole went a bit far. It wasn't as bad as the mission accomplished landing for George W. Bush on the aircraft carrier. But yeah, I would say this is a setback, and there needs to be a quick reversal of that setback.
Yeah. Hopefully they'll be able to make that happen pretty soon.
Then we commented on this issue in Syria on the question of sarin gas when it happened, and I'm no expert on science or sarin. But I do know that it's dangerous stuff. And, you hear that there's sarin gas in the room. You don't walk in and say, this is a good time to get a suntan. I mean, you better have protective gear on when that stuff is supposedly on anybody you might be treating as a doctor. And when I did not see protective clothing on the people who were supposedly dealing with the victims of this attack, I said, this just doesn't make sense to me. And now we get this report. Now, this OPCW, whatever it's called, Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Yeah,
I interviewed that guy in New Zealand who was part of that.
Yeah. I mean, would you say they're legitimate?
Yeah, he seemed like a very, intelligent academic type, but they are legitimate. Oh. They are legitimate. What he described was when they were about to release a report, literally like the day before Colin Powell gave his famous PowerPoint presentation to the UN, they were about to release a report saying, very detailed thing, no chemical weapons in Iraq, which we now know to be true. The notorious John Bolton went there to intimidate the Brazilian head of the organization and basically ruined that guy's life. It was an interesting interview. That took place in New Zealand when I went to visit Harmon Wilfred, and we were under, attack, so the channel didn't have its full reach. A lot of people might have missed that, but yeah, part of the OPCW. And I think they could have used the headline here, sorry, no Sarin.
You need to, another job, you can help them out.
Oh, I've got a lot of work already, Charles, just keeping up.
So if we can go into the body here, the next slide.
Next slide, yes.
All right. So this, you had that search warrant thing up there. If you hit the Politico link, the first one, yeah. This, we didn't really have enough time to get into this when we did our last presentation, but since then I've had an opportunity to read this again, and I would encourage the viewership to read, especially lawyers in our viewership, to read this very carefully. If we can go to, this warrant, if at the bottom here, issued, it turns out the 28th of August, 2015, okay? Mm-hmm. And if we go into the body a little bit to paragraph, on page 9, further down, well, stop here for a sec.
Whoops.
Sorry,
it's
my
lagging for some reason.
It's my fault, I'm jumping around on you. Please note here, down, yeah, that this action is brought under, this search is related to a violation of Code Section 18 U.S.C. 793E, unlawful possession and communication of national defense information, NDI, 18 U.S.C. 793F, unlawful removal or failure to report unlawful removal of NDI. This, when we go into...
Huge crime, no?
Well, in the Inspector General report, okay, it's all the legal analysis of why there couldn't be a prosecution was targeted 18 U.S.C. 7, most of the legal analysis, 793 A, B, C, and D, where those sections require you to have intent. E and F specifically do not require intent. If we just stay here for a sec, the significance of this to me, not being a lawyer, is here they went through a process in this contested Eastern District of Virginia, okay, while McCabe's wife was running for office in 2015. They're going through a process here of saying, we want to investigate this server because we think Hillary Clinton and her team have violated these two subsections where intent is not required. And somehow, by the time July 5th rolls around 2016, between August 28th, 2015 and July 5th, 2016, no reasonable prosecutor, says dopey James Comey, would bring a prosecution. Well, then why did you get this search warrant sworn out? And how did you go from, who was the team that said, let's go for this back August 28th, 2015? And how did that team get manipulated into a new team and people resigning suddenly, like Giacolone and others? Why the transition? Why did McCabe get put in charge of Deputy Director of the FBI February 1st? How come they knew in February 2016, having gotten the search warrant, that they knew she'd mishandled 2,115 pieces minimum of classified information, that some of them, many of them, were at the highest possible level? How then do they make this decision following the tarmac meeting by chance between Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton, talking about grandchildren and golf and how hot it was probably? How do they go from a really deep diving investigation, August 28th, 2015, to this ridiculous conclusion of July 5th? It doesn't make sense.
I'm trying to see if we can find that section of the IG report where they're talking about
Why
that.
is this only 39 pages?
You know what? Because I couldn't find it on my computer, so I just brought up one that I found online, so that must be the wrong one.
That's the wrong one. Well, let's not go in that direction. We'll do a whole presentation on it because it's a lot of work.
Okay, we won't worry about that.
But and we can jump into this though. Devin Nunes, and I love the way the Grubers of this world. The
Hans Gruber?
No, the Professor Gruber. Who got up there and said, the American people are too dumb to understand Obamacare, the architect of Obamacare, and all those type of people. Well, look down their noses at Americans, and in particular people like Devin Nunes, who I believe is a farmer, I think,
Is
At
he?
least he has a farm out in California, which is farming is not easy
Oh.
anywhere, but in California it's probably
Yeah.
very hard.
Maybe almonds.
And you know, people are sniping at this Devin Nunes and Democrats, Adam Schiff and others, are sniping at Devin Nunes. And Devin Nunes is somebody I believe Crowdsource the Truth needs to support, you know, as in every way we can. Maybe not monetarily, you know, he may not need money, but our focus, our attention, our encouragement, you know, bringing as much to his attention as possible. But now he's calling for the House to investigate 42 different anti-Trump activists. And I think the list is longer than that,
Wow.
but 42 is a good number to start with.
Maybe he should start with 44, if you know who I'm talking about.
I do.
He's the #1 anti-Trump activist.
Exactly. And Valerie Jarrett.
Yeah, Devin Nunes is great. He's doing work with Robin Gritz, I believe. He's brought her case to the attention
good.
of various people. So we're indirectly in touch with Devin Nunes.
Well, hats off to you, sir. Thanks for doing the nation's work, and thanks for thinking, you know, more broadly than just about your constituency out there in the failed state of California.
California stand?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so back to the slides here.
Now, Michael Goodwin is a wonderful columnist, has this column in the New York Post here, suggesting that Hillary is already secretly planning to run in 2020. And I say, bring it.
Right.
Bring it. Please, you know, Democrats, you know, deplete your coffers. By all means, write more checks to Hillary Clinton. You know, it's never going to get, it's just, you may as well just take that money and burn it.
Yeah. Flush it down the toilet in the Chappaqua Data Center. I frankly would love to see her run because nothing would be more fun than seeing her lose again.
I honestly don't think she's doing anything other than fundraising to get more grifter money for her grifter causes.
Actually, I remember what I was thinking when I saw this. I believe that it's entirely possible that Hillary Clinton would start this rumor that she's going to run for president and possibly even start an exploratory committee and everything so that if Donald Trump's Department of Justice brings charges against her, they can say, oh, you're just doing that because she's your political opponent. And then it goes back to John Podesta's statement that you can't put her in jail because that's like third world country stuff.
Yeah, nice, Podfather, nice try.
But I think that's the way they like to do it. They plant a seed and then they can go back to that stupid story.
I think that's right, but what they're forgetting here, and I think you're seeing it in the rallies across the country, that it's not simply Republicans coming out to see Donald Trump, it's not just Caucasians, it's not just white men. It's
Right.
a cross-section of this country who's encouraged by the progress this disruptor is making. And the simple truth is, we have never had a family, a dynastic political family, as crooked as the crooked Clinton family, crooked Clinton crime family, be involved at national level for this long, getting away with this much. We've never had it before. So if people who would fall for that, the Podfather, has his own set of crimes to think about, and in his relationship with his brother, and their crooked deals and their ties to Russia. I mean, the Podfather is the last person I'd be taking advice from at this moment in time.
Absolutely. And, just on the topic of not just Republicans, this is Brandon, I believe his last name is Straka, who started this walk away movement. And I've been in touch with Brandon. He's very, very busy. I'm trying to get him on the show. And he has tentatively agreed to do that. We're just trying to find a time that works for both of us. But he put together a video talking about how he originally became a Democrat because they stood for everything, or at least he thought they did, that he stood for. But he's now learned that they're liars and they rely on violence and suppressing opposition.
And actually, this author, Celia Farber, is a wonderful human being who's written extensively about the HIV/AIDS crisis, about the Clintons. Her father is Barry Farber, who's the iconic original conservative radio talk show host before Rush, before Sean. Pleased to see that Celia is writing again.
Yeah, and it looks like Adorama refused Brandon's service, which is very shocking to me. That's a Hasidic-owned camera store that is right near here that I have been to, but perhaps people should consider the politics of Adorama before they purchase electronics or cameras from them.
You mean Subtractorama?
Subtractorama, exactly. They're busy kicking out our friend Brandon, which is, that's crazy that they would do that. Really unacceptable on every level.
Yeah.
How would they feel if they were denied service somewhere because they're Hasidic Jews?
It's outrageous. It's outrageous.
It is.
So we're seeing this Western Journal piece is really interesting. Here we're seeing a black woman, an Obama voter who is now a gun lover. Now, if we think about that for a second, the gun laws in this country are not gun laws that say minorities can't have guns.
Correct.
Right? In fact, if you, one of the great disparate treatments or poor disparate treatments that I'm aware of in this city and across this country is that there are parts of New York City, there are parts, large swaths of Chicago and the other cities where the police department will not go at night because it's so dangerous. And there are law-abiding people who sadly get trapped in these neighborhoods. What are they supposed to do? They've got a crime, you know, they're staring death in the face, the police won't come. The Constitution says, you know, if their records are clean, they can own a weapon. And that's I bring it up in this way, that's the reason that people in rural communities, many of them they like to hunt, they have weapons, but one of the reasons they have weapons is that it takes far longer for the police to get out in these rural areas and in these tough urban areas to get to the scene of the crime than it might take to defend yourself. And that is leading, I know of another, I don't know, many people like this in Manhattan, but I know of an extreme liberal woman who I met by chance, and she, you know, admitted to me that she fears for her safety in New York, and she carries a weapon.
Wow. And
she enjoys going to, this is a liberal, she enjoys going to the gun range and shooting. Now, you know, the idea that you should want to own a weapon is pitched by the intelligentsia, by the elite. That's ludicrous. There's no reason to own a weapon. That's not true, sadly. That is not true at all. Sporting is one reason. Some people, I don't own a weapon and wouldn't want one in Manhattan myself, but you know, I enjoy shooting guns. It's target practice, that's fun. And didn't Barack Obama say at one point, you know, we've never seen him do this, that he loves to shoot skeet? Remember that? He did, actually. And I was like, huh? I don't think so.
Does skeet work for Dick Cheney?
I don't think so.
You know, I may be stating the obvious, Charles, but many black people that I speak to simply don't trust the police. And I think that Barack Obama was really in a unique position to help the black community of America by, I would have liked to have seen him create a dialogue between police and black youth. And you know, people say, oh, he had a Republican Congress. I mean, I'm not talking about passing laws. He's the president. He could have created some sort of president's council, some sort of summit, invite sports stars, rap stars, people that maybe black youth might listen to. I don't think a 14-year-old black kid in Chicago is going to listen to Donald Trump in the same way that he would Barack Obama or Allen Iverson or Snoop Dogg. They could have put together something to start the police in communities talking to members of the community.
Well, what about Shaquille O'Neal? I mean, Shaquille O'Neal
He's done good work.
Shaquille O'Neal is on the police force. He rides with the police. He's very much a supporter of
and then he goes to neighborhoods and like plays basketball with the kids, and they'll listen to Shaquille O'Neal because they look up to him. And if he comes with someone from the police and opens a dialogue, maybe now we have a chance. Like in the movie What Happened in Vegas, Ramsey Dennison highlighted not just the corruption in the Las Vegas Metro PD, he went quite extensively into the history of one particular officer who did exactly what I'm describing. He created a neighborhood program where he was actually talking to the kids, and he had a relationship with this one gang member where sometimes these guys would show up and that kid would act as kind of an intermediary and diffuse violence.
Right.
So Barack Obama blew it, and if I were black, I'd be even more disappointed in Barack Obama than I am.
Right. Which is tough to be.
Tough to be, exactly.
So this is amusing. This piece here in the Global Times was something, there's a wonderful person called Katya Blanova,
Oh, yes.
and she approached me over 2 years ago, and we've done I don't even know at this point how many interviews we've done, but this is amusing because we did this on Sputnik News, and here a Chinese news organization has picked up the summary of what she did. We've got others coming, but this is a shout out to Katya Blanova and to the highly professional people at Sputnik. And people are, very interested in looking down their nose at Sputnik, but the people I've met at Sputnik are far more professional than Jake Tapper, fake yapper,
Absolutely.
at CNN. And that's a low bar. They're far more professional than the folks at the New York Times who decided they had evidence, material evidence, right, that the Clinton Foundation was under an active FBI investigation. Now we know that investigation began in January 2016, and we know that by July of 2016, there was another IRS investigation. New York Times knows about this, and they say, oh no, we got to stifle that, and we're going to put Donald Trump's purloined tax return on the cover of the New York Times in the middle of the election, but we're going to sit on the fact that the Clinton Foundation is a fraud and is under investigation.
Excellent word choice, purloined. I appreciate that. It's shocking. And Lee Stranahan is with Sputnik. I've been on there, so I've been on Sputnik. When Alex Jones did his press conference in Washington, D.C. about the lawfare attack that InfoWars is coming under, which coincidentally Crowdsource the Truth is as well, someone, I forget his name, from CBS was basically, I don't even want to say heckling, but straight up fighting with Lee Stranahan, accusing him of being a Russian agent working for Sputnik.
Unlike John Podesta, who was involved.
Uranium One.
Not just Uranium One, who failed to disclose his investments appropriately, the fact that he still held them in a company that the name will come to me in a second, but in a company that the Russian government did make a sweetheart investment in, potentially enriching him. So, I mean, it's just outrageous. But
it is outrageous. It's absolutely crazy.
So hats
How
off.
come he didn't have to? Like, they've got Flynn, but nothing for Podfather.
So what we want to do now, we're almost to the point where we're going to get back and engage on the whole question of the Clinton Foundation. Now, True Pundit has this story up here about the investigation of the Clinton Foundation in Little Rock being a fraud, and I hope this is wrong. I don't question. I don't question that the special agent in charge has dodgy connections to McCabe. That I grant you, okay. But the line team on this does not, and the line team on this, I believe, is very fully engaged. And I believe the FBI practice is to have investigations on topics as complex as the Clinton Foundation occur not just in one office. So while it is true this person's bona fides need to be subjected to the close scrutiny they deserve, I think it's also true that the FBI is in the process of doing an extraordinary deep dive into the whole Clinton Foundation. And so I hope Thomas Paine has reached the wrong conclusion. I think the article on balance is helpful, because it certainly got my dander up.
Hackles?
Hackles.
Did it go down to the hackles?
It got as far as those hackles.
Wow. That's not good for the FBI. I would put a lot of stock in what Thomas Paine says. I would also add that, very curiously, last week, a coordinated attack on Thomas Paine and True Pundit occurred, not just in the form of crappy comments going on YouTube videos or tweets, but someone actually put together a rather sophisticated website attempting to, debunk.
Yeah, I saw that.
I mean, that's beyond trolling. That's someone organized trying to discredit him, which for me sends a signal: who created this site, how accurate is their information, and it didn't seem accurate on first read, and why would they be motivated to do that? So we'll have to keep our eyes on that, of course.
So just I'm going to give now the high-level counter-argument against the Clinton Foundation. So where the Clinton Foundation gets its accolades is really principally in defending the proposition that they primarily brought the price of HIV/AIDS medicines down, and that they've done wonders fighting HIV/AIDS around the world. That's basically, their argument for the silly group. The people are easily Gruberized, who don't care about the facts, were inclined to support the corrupt Clintons anyway. So here we have what they call themselves PolitiFact. I call them PolitiFraud.
Yeah.
Because I was in touch with PolitiFraud, the person who wrote this, John Greenberg, before he wrote this story. And I saved my emails, and I asked him on the phone conversation, I said, listen, John, how much do you know about charity law and charity reporting? And he said, nothing. Nothing at all.
Ideal candidate to write this article.
Exactly. So he writes this piece September 23rd, 2016, and we think about the timing. This is significant moments of time here, right before the election. It's past the 60-day rule. He writes this piece appearing to debunk a piece that Richard Pollack, who's a wonderful human being, Emmy Award-winning, gentleman in his 60s, lots of experience in investigative reporting in multiple media formats, and an acquaintance of mine. So this piece goes out. Of course, the mainstream media blares it all over the place. And if you go to the next link, not that one.
Oh, sorry.
It's
Not that.
sorry. It's these two here. Okay, this is Richard Pollack responding to that piece on November 4th, 2016. All right, the Clinton Foundation gave, in working to fight against this piece that Richard had written earlier, the Clinton Foundation actually supplied doctored evidence. Does that sound familiar to you at all?
Yes.
Right before an election, November 4th, 2016, 4 days before the election, in order to debunk Richard's excellent true article, they provide doctored evidence, which Richard hires consultants to show is in fact doctored. This is a must-read article, but we won't go through it in great depth now. And it shows you the levels to which the Clintons will sink, to manipulate election results, to manipulate understanding the truth of what the Clinton Foundation actually may have allegedly been doing with its HIV/AIDS program. And then if you go back into the slides there, this Michael Smith piece here, we've had it up before. This is another example. And this is Michael Smith's a wonderful human being. Another example of, the degree to which the Clinton Foundation backdated all sorts of documents. And I was actually looking through this morning on my own notes to re-examine the degree to which Australia is complicit in enabling this fraud. And what I realized, and I'm going to talk to Michael about this by email, what I realized is that the contributions, the grants by Australia, the initial early grants in this period in 2008 through 2010, which total about 25 million Australian dollars or more, these grants were sent to a fictitious address, an address that didn't exist. 225 Water Street, they'd moved out of that by the time in 2008 that the Australian money started going towards the Clinton Foundation. So, the Australian government, and that's Alexander Downer, and others, are sitting on trying to cover up a monumental fraud, the degree to which their government illegally, supposedly funded HIV programs with an entity that never existed lawfully, in countries where charity fraud is punishable by death. China is one of them.
Whoa.
Okay, the Australian money went to a crooked foundation for a program in China when they weren't registered in China, and there's a woman in China, a billionairess, who is in prison with a commuted death sentence to life in prison for charity fraud on a smaller magnitude.
Wow.
So, as we get now into what we're going to take you through some minutiae here on the Clinton Foundation and its frauds from a slightly different perspective, understand that there's a rich vein of evidence that dopey James Comey and crooked Robert Mueller and these other people, Rosenstein, decided, it involves the Clintons, we're not going to take a look at this.
Right. But Charles, don't you think that our friend John Greenberg had 3 weeks here to look at Michael Smith News and determine that backdated contracts were involved. He didn't do.
I think the whole issue of politifraud, which itself is a subsidiary of a journalism school, part of a journalism school that is funded by hard left people. It is not. It's like Snopes. There isn't yet out there an objective site that will take a contentious issue and really, educate the public the way we're trying to do it.
I was going to say,
the facts.
crowdsourcethetruth.org.
Except for crowdsourcethetruth.org. Yeah.
Okay.
So and then the one final thing in there, there's this, on that page, the one you skipped over here. Here we have Senator Bill Frist, this one. Saying Republicans must protect Mueller. Huh, Bill? Are you saying this perchance, Bill, because you were involved in a charity fraud as a trustee involving the Clinton Foundation called Alliance for a Healthier Generation and the Haiti operation? Is that perchance why you're saying now, as a Republican, that we need to protect Mr. Mueller? Now, the Frist family are actually extremely generous philanthropists. Bill Fritz's family was rich before he himself got even richer. They're big supporters of Princeton University. They have, they're honest people. But the notion that a Republican senator, former majority leader, would argue that we need to protect Robert Mueller, whose behavior so far is so diabolically, so far away. The standard is supposed to be you avoid not impropriety, but the appearance of impropriety. Mueller's performance on this investigation, to me, defines impropriety, may even define criminality, but it certainly shows the appearance of impropriety. For Frist to come out now and say we ought to give Mueller protection is absurd.
I agree with that, Charles. Another thing that I find very interesting about what we're doing here is that I know for a fact I've got some friends in Tennessee, and a lot of people don't know much about the people who are running for Senate. But frankly, what you've just said there about Bill Frist, I think might be everything that people need to know about the guy. So if you're in Tennessee, particularly Johnson City, I'm talking to someone in the crowdsourced community, perhaps this is all you need to know when you go to vote for your senator.
Well, I mean, the one is up this year is Marsha Blackburn is running.
So
he's out. Former senator.
Former.
But Marsha Blackburn, a great human being. I've had the pleasure of meeting her a few times and had extensive discussions with her very able staff. Marsha Blackburn is a first-class human being. Distinguished congressperson, very helpful in the whole investigation so far of the Clinton Foundation. She's up running, and she should win.
Yeah, right. So there's more good advice for people who are in Tennessee in Marsha Blackburn's district. You can check her out.
She's in Nashville. She represents Nashville.
Wonderful. I've actually got family in Tennessee, I just remembered.
Really?
Well, they moved there.
Are they in the moonshine business? Or?
Not in the moonshine business. But someone did bring up Popcorn Sutton the other day, and I have had occasion to sample Popcorn Sutton moonshine when we did Hillbilly Blood, TV show for Discovery Channel.
So does anyone wonder why the swamp isn't investigating the swamp? Yeah. I mean, I think we know. So let's just quickly go through some obvious evidence. Next page. This is there are very few numbers on this page, but I'm going to just spend a few minutes on this. In 2005, the Clinton Foundation was over a year into running something called Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, Inc., something that was set up on March 24th, 2004 by Bruce Lindsay. Okay? These excerpts are taken from this annual report, this glossy brochure that the Clinton Foundation shouldn't spend money on but does. This is not a document that well, I suppose it is a legal offering document, but it's not a document that a charity has to put together. It's not like your tax forms that you have to fill out and need to be accurate. It's not like an audit that's supposed to be compliant with AICPA regulations in the United States. Of course, they don't do either of those things, but they have a lot of time and money to create this glossy brochure. And what does the glossy brochure say about this thing, the CHI procurement activities? Now, What chai procurement is, it's the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Procurement Consortium. That's where they got together and they convinced a large number of governments around the world, tell us your information about the amount of drugs by type and equipment that you're going to purchase going forward into the future, and we will bundle your purchases with vendors to get you lower prices. Now that sounds, on surface level, that sounds like a nice idea. In business, it's done all the time. But the question is that charitable? And if it is charitable, did the Clinton Foundation bother to provide any information to the public and to regulators about what they'd done? Here it says they worked in close partnership with governments. Now, as a charity operating internationally, you can't work for a government. Okay, so the gating question here is, was the Clinton Foundation acting as an agent for these governments or not? And the language to me suggests they were. Okay? By the end of 2005, the number of people accessing these medicines, HIV/AIDS medicines, purchased under chai agreements. Now, there are no information about these agreements in the public domain, right, in their tax returns.
Looking for that annual report. Is that it right there, the PDF?
Yeah, right there. Purchase under chai agreements increased fourfold. And they entered into partnerships, it says here, with the governments of Cambodia, Vietnam, Papua New Guinea, and Ukraine.
What could possibly go wrong?
Well, does it sound to you as if this thing existed? That, actually it might have had stuff to do, that it was busy. You look here, they have agreements, it says, with a whole bunch of these suppliers. Now, we're going down the list. Aspen Pharmacare, use Ortel's first law on each one of these companies. Not all of them will show up as fraudsters, but by the time you get to Ranbaxy, we've been through Ranbaxy at length, in January of 2006, scant weeks before Ranbaxy Labs is raided in the United States, and ultimately May 2013, 13th May 2013, the announcement comes, Ranbaxy pays a $500 million fine for supplying adulterated medicine inside the United States and probably elsewhere. Okay? They have arrangements with these pharmaceutical companies, a whole bunch of diagnostics companies, and yet there's no information of any kind in this annual report or in the tax filings about how much money was raised, how much money was spent procuring drugs from which of these people, diagnostic equipment from which. There's no information of any kind in the 2005 tax filing or in the audit for the Clinton Foundation, which is required. And by the way, there's no evidence the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative was ever validly given tax exemption as a charity. So, here you have abundant information lifted from a marketing brochure that the Clinton Foundation itself put out into the public domain, implicating itself in charity fraud.
Wow. Right?
And then we go down the page a little bit and say, these words are fantastic, you're buying all this medicine. When we look into your financial filings, how much money shows up as being used to purchase drugs? And it's the only red word at the bottom, two red words. How much is shown?
It's like $3 million.
No.
Oh. What?
Read the beginning of the sentence. The Clinton Foundation declared how much?
0. Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
0 on its 990, while this old chai, which is this entity that Bruce Lindsay created,
right,
okay, and a hidden filing that's not on the Clinton Foundation website, they claim they spent $3,382,603 in 2005 on drugs. It's not a lot of money on drugs.
But it's a discrepancy when you compare it to 0.
Is it?
I'm no math genius, but it seems like it might be.
Now, then the thing that is really amazing here when you look at this is that the merger agreement that was drafted effective December 31st, 2005. So this is a list of suppliers in January of 2006. December 31st, 2005, the terms of the merger agreement, which are hidden on the Clinton Foundation website but available in ProPublica, call for this old chai to be liquidated on December 31st, 2005. How could it have been liquidated? How are these agreements structured? Did the government of Cambodia, Vietnam, Papua New Guinea, and Ukraine enter into agreements with the parent Clinton Foundation, with the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative? How did they transfer these agreements over into 2006, once the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative was liquidated on December 31st, 2005? Was it indeed liquidated? Was it indeed even set up in any of these foreign countries? For each of these manufacturers, show us an agreement that you entered into. Under what law, the law of what country was the agreement structured? Aspen Pharmacare Holdings, I believe, is a South African company. Cipla is an Indian company. Ranbaxy is an Indian company. Matrix is each of these companies, how did you structure these agreements? What were the terms of the agreements? Did any of the investors and controlling shareholders in any of these companies contribute to the Clinton Foundation or pay for speeches involving the Clintons or provide an economic benefit to anybody connected with the Clinton Foundation, any trustee, any investor, any donor? These are the types of questions that would normally be answered by responsible people running a charity, but that's not the way the swamp works, the Clinton swamp works. No, we write a document with all these fancy pictures in it and words about all the great stuff we're doing fighting HIV/AIDS, and we're not doing any of that legally. Okay?
So, yeah, I mean, it's shocking, Charles. It is a very nice-looking brochure that makes Bill Clinton seem like a great guy and everything, but no one seems to be asking these questions except for you, and I detect from the tone of your voice that you know the answer already.
Yeah, well, we'll keep going, and I'll show you a few more things.
Sure.
So, if we go to the next page, yeah. All right, so this gives you a sense. This so-called Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Procurement Consortium, and we're not going to bring up these links now because it'll take extra time, but people who are interested, in particular you investigators, hopefully the FBI might still be watching the show,
I think so.
And other foreign governments around the world, follow each of these links. And then ask yourself, here, the 6th of September 2005, they're signing an MOU with Kazakhstan. Now, Kazakhstan is a country that has very few people with HIV/AIDS.
A lot of uranium, though.
But they have a lot of uranium, exactly. And so at this time, they're claiming there are 40 member nations in this Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Procurement Consortium on the 6th of September 2005. Okay? Well, if the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative goes into liquidation on December 31st, 2005, what happened to all those member nation agreements? How do they expand to 50 by the 27th, and then, stay at 50, now 66, 68, 70. The entity, the main thing, was liquidated in theory.
What happened to all the money he says he's spending on the beer?
Exactly. And then more to the point, this is small. If we just move this up the page a little bit here, this is a very important precedent set in 1980. A non-profit pharmaceutical service was not exempt as a charitable organization because it was operated for the substantial commercial purpose of providing pharmacy services to the general public. The relevance here is if these nations are banding together to get lower prices for things they want to purchase, but if the vendors are not losing money or the charity is not giving the items away, this is just a buying consortium. This is not a charitable activity. And so this could be why we don't have the information about it, because they can't. What they were doing was actually promoting the business interests
Totally illegal.
of the vendors. This is not a charity. And it's far outside the charter of the Clinton Foundation, which was supposed to be what? A presidential archive and research center, and have an endowment based in Little Rock. It's not supposed to be a massage parlor. It's not supposed to be putting green. It's not supposed to be a penthouse and nightclub. It's not supposed to be a banquet hall like the Grand Prospect Hall over there in
Grand Prostitute Hall? What?
I didn't say that. But so you start looking into this, and it doesn't take expertise in charity law to say, okay, this is supposed to be something narrowly focused on being a presidential archive in Little Rock, and we've got these yin-yangs running around the world concocting crooked deals, saying that what they're doing is fighting HIV/AIDS, when what they're really doing is promoting the stock prices and business interests of vendors who can't tap into the U.S. market the way they'd like to, who may fear that the U.S. market is going to come down hard on them, as they ultimately did in the case of Ranbaxy, and is throwing, as the phrase, a sop to Cerberus, a sop to the dog who guards the gates of hell, the Clintons. They're throwing these sops away in the hopes of finding favor with the future president of the United States.
I really do need to have the William J. Clinton Memorial Massage Parlor on favorite, so anytime you mention it, I can just bring it up right away.
So then if we go to the next page. All right. Now, here are a whole bunch of agreements struck between commercial companies who all say they're going to do work with the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative that doesn't exist.
Did they spell struck with a Z?
But seriously, these are, and I didn't put all of them up there. And by the way, on the 31st December 2007, we provided a link to you before, Massachusetts, they supposedly liquidated the thing on December 31st, 2005, but by the 31st December 2007, even Massachusetts, home to, Hiawatha and John Kerry and Ted Kennedy, even the government of Massachusetts took a look at this Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS stuff and said, nope, this is too dirty for us. We're shutting you boys down.
That's really substantial.
Right?
And really, you're the only person I ever hear talking about that. Almost nobody in the mainstream. Everyone just thinks the Clintons are great, and then no one talks about any of this.
And so this, if we hit this report here, this is Marshall Blackburn's report on, it came out, again, right before the election, on the Clinton Foundation, and this is the Clinton Foundation and the India story, self-serving philanthropy, watered-down drugs and money in sub-Saharan Africa. It's a very good, if you hit this link here, it's a thorough report, 78 pages, heavily footnoted, and really worth a close read, you investigators out there, to see the genesis of the Clinton Foundation involvement, illegal involvement, around the world in violation of their charter. And, I certainly hope we're at a stage now, thanks to Marshall's efforts, we have had a robust, in theory, IRS investigation in process now for 2 long years. As Trey Gowdy, said, they need to finish their damn work here. This is not complicated. The IRS has fearsome power, and the real thing that should be going on here is not only to investigate the Clinton Foundation, but to investigate every single person who was investigating the Clinton Foundation and failed to see this long ago.
Yeah.
But I commend this report to people's reading. There's a lot of source material here. You want to get into the weeds. We're not going to do it right now in the broadcast because I'm mindful of the time, but that's a fantastic document.
And I believe Mr. Gowdy told them to finish the hell up.
Exactly. So,
which is edgy for the Senate floor, wherever he said that.
So if we go to the next page. Now this is, again, I'm going to do this, I spent a little bit of time on it because it's numbers, okay? The simple way to think about the crime that occurred here is that you can't raise money for one purpose and use it for another purpose. You can't go and say, in this year I want to, I'm raising money because I'm authorized to fight HIV/AIDS internationally, and I'm going to spend it on drugs. You give me the money for drugs, and I'm going to spend it on that. Okay?
Coke.
This is one donor, Unitate. Okay? We're taking all the money that Unitate gave in 6, 7, and 8. The subtotal is Manhattan's area code, 212 million. All right? They took from Unitate 2006, 7, 8, 212 million. But yet, the Clinton Foundation discloses that all of the money they spent on drugs in this time frame was $110 million, $109.8 million. Okay? Bearing in mind here, ladies and gentlemen, that, and listen up, Gruber, bearing in mind, because I know you're so good with numbers, this is just one of the donors that gave money to the Clinton Foundation to fight HIV/AIDS and to purchase drugs. If you look at down here, we have the governments of Australia, Ireland, Great Britain, Sweden, Canada, France, Denmark, Norway, and the Dominican Republic, all in addition giving money to the Clinton Foundation. This is from the Memorandum of Misunderstanding signed on November 16th by Valerie Jarrett and Bruce Lindsay. They're claiming that in addition to Unitate, all of these governments gave money.
And she changed the date on
She
that
changed the
signature.
date. But then, so we go back up into this. You're talking about $100 million difference if you just look at this is where Unitate says in its reports In 2006-7, we gave 71.8 million to be spent in 2007. Okay? In 2008, we gave you 140 million to be spent in 2008. That's what's called a current year payment or accrual. So this measures here just the money that UNITAID said spend it in a given year. And here's the total amount of money that they spent on drugs by their admission. And then in addition to these amounts, it was UNITAID primarily who was suckered into giving money in advance of the Clinton Foundation's need for it. By 2008, UNITAID and others had advanced another $100 million.
Jeez.
So that the Clinton Foundation had either cash that they hadn't spent or advances that they hadn't spent. They had an extra $203 million.
So much money.
It's a lot of money. And remember, by 2008, March 31st, 2008, Commonwealth of Massachusetts says, shut her down. You know, the Clinton Foundation's out of business. It's sitting on $203 million. Now, what was going on in 2007 and 8?
Hillary running for Senate?
Hillary was running for president.
Oh, right,
And
against
she
Obama.
needed a lot
Right.
of money. And then,
Right.
so how much of this money that was not spent on fighting HIV/AIDS, you know, may have been temporarily placed in a bank account where lenders to the campaign could say, well, all right, you know, we'll lend you a bit more money because we know you got this money over here, you know. And this is a major league diversion, because when you take a step back from all this analysis assumes that the Clinton Foundation was authorized to fight HIV/AIDS.
Right.
It wasn't authorized for that purpose. So all of these activities, the multiple wires, the multiple requests, not simply to UNITAID and the constituent elements of UNITAID, but to all these other governments, all of those communications, where do you think those might have been?
Possibly among the 33,000 missing emails on the secret server that was bleach bitted before it was smashed.
You're pretty good. Or in the 650,000 other
On
emails
Anthony
that
Weiner's computer.
that we don't even know about.
Can I ask you something, Charles? Was UNITAID suckered or were they complicit? Wasn't Sarkozy somehow involved with UNITAID?
Yeah, I mean, he ultimately was the leader of France after UNITAID came together in September of 2006. But yeah, I think what this likely is and was is one gigantic slush fund.
Right.
And
Obviously.
And in Europe and in France, the election rules are stricter than the United States. You cannot spend as much money. So to get elected, you need money. All these politicians need money to win their elections, and then once they get out of office, you know, they don't like to say to the wife, you know, we're going to be staying at Bada Book, Bada Bing, or whatever, the La Quinta
The
Inn.
Bada Bing Club?
You know, the
Yeah.
La Quinta Inn or whatever it is.
Oh,
You know.
yeah.
You know, you're not staying there,
Right.
honey. You will stay at the presidential palace because I got my, you know, magic flow of money that nobody checks out of the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah. I had a question, but it slipped my mind. We'll come back to it.
So if we just go back, so we can go to the next page.
Oh, yeah. The question was, what is happening with Mr. Sarkozy? We heard that he was arrested, but haven't heard anything else about it.
Well, I think what's been going on in France, and again, the process around the world is, I think, more or less the same as the United States, at least the advanced world, where government investigations are, the progress of them is kept quiet until indictments are tendered in the public or guilty pleas are copped to, et cetera. So we do know, as it's a matter of public record, that the French government, through its accounting court, the Cour des Comptes, and we go back to Fabien Chalandon's fantastic work, and for our viewers who miss the great Fabien, first piece of news is, though he's over there in Japan right now, where there are all kinds of slides and earthquakes and stuff like that, I was in communication with him this morning. He's fine, his family's fine. He's going to be heading to France and in Europe for much of the summer, and we're going to have the pleasure of having him on the show again, so he can bring us up to date. But he has done a number of presentations. Viewers can go back to them. You'll see that France did investigate UNITAID, but they missed the core of this problem. And so the French government is under some pressure now to go back in and investigate this stuff.
I would also remind people, Charles, that Pinko Panthers presentation that we did with Fabien was the one that came under severe attack. We'll notice that, like so many of the Sunday with Charles shows, it has many thousands of views, 14,000. That's actually kind of low, but it has this anomalous 1.1 thousand thumbs down, which we've heard reports on the internet, and frankly, it seems quite obvious. This is a manufactured result intended to prevent people from searching for and finding this very comprehensive presentation in which you and Fabian present compelling information. There's quite obviously something in there that somebody doesn't want people to see.
This was another triumph for the art department.
Yeah, that was a good one. The hits keep coming, Charles, you know?
So if we just jump back in for a sec. This is a great piece that just came out from John Solomon, the first piece, where he writes that there are memos saying that the FBI has to hurry the F, and I don't think it means the father or the famous person. I think it's hurry the expletive up, pressure to probe the Trump campaign.
I meant to ask you about that. I noticed just recently that The Hill is funded by Koch, like the Koch brothers.
I know.
So what is that all about? That doesn't seem good.
It doesn't seem good, but I would say this about John Solomon. I think his work is very strong. And,
I definitely like John Solomon, but it's a good opportunity to remind people that Crowdsource the Truth is not funded by any particular billionaire. And I have a problem with the Koch brothers funding a news outlet, because I think that if there's some real compelling information that's not so favorable to them, it's unlikely to appear in The Hill. But I do like John Solomon. He's very professional and always been nice to me and nice to us.
He's a good man. We need to have him back on.
Absolutely. I would welcome that for sure.
So then this story here, the second, the conservative treehouse, I mean, this way in which, I would argue, that circle, yeah, if we go to, yeah, the way in which these contractors got involved, feeding information that was then sort of packaged up to then create arguments for somebody who had failed a polygraph test, Peter Strzok, on 6 months before, to work with this crook, to use this Steele dossier, to get the files. I mean, this process, we really need to go through a public lesson learned experience where exactly what happened here. How many people were involved rigging an insurance policy to make sure, on the one hand, that if Hillary didn't win, that Donald Trump would be so crippled that it would, that in their minds, America would be saved the indignity of a President Trump upstart by a quick impeachment. I mean, how much planning went into this? How many people were involved? How many of these people are collecting government pensions? How many of these people do have and should experience real legal liability?
This is a very good infographic, and I'm just looking at how frequently Peter Strzok's name appears. He's really moving the ball down the field, as it were.
Yeah, and it's just, this is a collection of people who decided that they're above the law, above the system. And I think that's really the problem, that the elitist globalists, they're all spread throughout academia and the corporate media and the Justice Department, the IRS, the Treasury Department, State Department, and they all, kind of believe that elections are for little people and they really shouldn't have consequences unless those consequences are to, push us more towards unregulated globalism, as happened under Obama, W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and H.W. Bush. I mean, that's a mentality that I don't think anybody should sign on to. We do not have a global government with checks and balances. We have the largest government in the world, the United States, that's run amok. There have been a lot of, it would appear to me to see a lot of criminal activity here that needs to get fully exposed, and then the malefactors need to be really shamed and humiliated and severely punished to set an example that this not happen again.
Agreed.
So I'll move it along if we get back into the L Slidos. We talked about this electronics store guy already, but this is hilarious, this President Trump trolling in the Hill story. Twitter recently purged a large number of fake accounts, supposedly fake accounts. Here's Donald Trump tweeting out, does this mean Trump is going to axe the New York Times and the Washington Post from the Twitter feed as well?
That's good.
He's pretty funny.
Definitely.
So then we go back in. This one, I mean, this article, I was reading it in, forget where I was reading it. It might have been a library. There is only one Stein, Mark Stein, and this man is just so funny, such a gifted writer. But this piece caused me, well, when he called her, what does he call her? Further down, he calls her something even funnier.
Fake-a-Julia?
Crock-a-Julia. But it's really, really very funny. I had forgotten that in the Pow Wow Chow cookbook that she did long ago, before she became a senator.
She did
Keep going, you'll see. It's called Pow Wow Chow.
Oh my God.
But it turns out that some of the entries for, here we go. Some of the entries, back in '84, she submitted some of her favorite dishes to the Pow Wow Chow cookbook, a compilation of recipes passed down through the 5 tribe families, okay?
5 tribes of Israel?
Indian.
There are only 5 Indian tribes? Aren't there many?
Look at this one. Elizabeth Warren Cherokee sent in a crab dish with tomato mayonnaise. And then here's Stein saying that the state song for Oklahoma is Oklahoma, where the crabs come sweeping down the plain. There are no crabs in Oklahoma.
And I don't think the Indians ate much other than like bison and deer and stuff like that.
Well, the ones,
fish.
They would definitely eat, in Maryland they would definitely, but not the Cherokee Indians. But then it gets, as they say on those infomercials, but wait, it gets worse.
Yeah.
It gets worse. It turns out that the recipe for that she used here is from a very fancy French New York restaurant called Le Pavillon.
That's so stupid.
I know.
So, is this another... See,
Crock-a-Julia, that's what you call it.
Crock-a-Julia. You know what's funny, Charles, is that this bit of activity, I was talking to you just briefly about this video we did with Quinn Michaels last night where he's talking about this telecomics playbook and planting fake stories like this through social media. That's what it tells people to do. She's kind of using that here.
Well, but see here, this is for me, very serious. I mean, this is somebody, the situation at Harvard, then I got out of business school in 1980, but I remember the controversy because I was still reading the alumni magazines at that point. And the controversy was that the law faculty was too white and the law students were not diverse enough. And there was a major league agitation. Harvard was coming under fire because its faculty was not diverse. And Elizabeth Warren has a decidedly undistinguished career in the law. Okay, she would never have gotten, in my view, to the faculty of Harvard Law had she not falsely claimed that she was of Native American heritage. And when we think about in this country, one of the places, one of the areas which really I think long and hard about is the degree to which the original settlers, and some of them, or I'm descended from some of them, did they treat, how unfairly did the original settlers treat the Native Americans in the end? And how have those policies, failed to actually do right by the descendants of the original Native American settlers? And for this, white Okie from Fanoki, with no connection, it would seem no serious connection to the Native American group, to use these spurious connections, A, to get into Harvard Law School as a professor, and then B, to parachute her way into being a senator representing the deranged state of Massachusetts. I mean, this is somebody who has an attitude towards right and wrong that basically doesn't understand, is against the word right. She doesn't understand being correct. She doesn't understand being fair. And that she should seriously believe that she's a credible candidate for president against Donald Trump. If the Democrats make the mistake of nominating this idiot to be presidential contender against Donald Trump, the Democrats will be lucky to get 5 of the 50 states, in my view. She is such a fraud, and I think Trump's offer of giving $1 million to her favorite charity if she'll take this 23andMe or Ancestry test to prove that she actually is Native American. It's a genius move. She's already flubbed the response. She should have immediately said, okay, I'll do it.
Right.
But now, why is Donald Trump obsessing about my genes and not reuniting families at the border? I mean, this may play in the Harvard Law School faculty lounge, but it's not going to play in the voting booth.
That's pretty good, Charles.
So, we're going to drift now into international news. Emmanuel Macron, who was friendly with Donald Trump, has got a serious problem on his hands. French vacations, you heard Fabienne's going to be on vacation soon. The French all go on vacation more or less the same day. Seriously, it's a tradition. They go on the same day. And that's when riot season breaks out in France. You know, we've had this, I joke about it, we really shouldn't because it's dangerous. But there are parts of France regularly in the summer where the sport becomes turning over police cars, setting them on fire, burning tourist cars, creating mayhem. And that has got to stop. You cannot go to a G7. I would argue that you shouldn't be trotting around as a G7 leader when you can't maintain order inside your own country. And Emmanuel Macron has got some very serious problems, as do other advocates of these sanctuary cities and letting no-go zones operate inside a sovereign nation. That's got to stop. There shouldn't be no-go zones anywhere in any civilized nation on earth.
Yeah.
And that's an area where I would argue the United States needs to roll up its sleeves and make sure there are no-go zones in the United States. There are, I believe, still places, we mentioned portions of this city and other cities, where we don't really have full control 24/7. That's got to change.
Right.
This summit with Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, I hope a lot of advanced planning has gone into that, because I think it's very important that dialogue be reestablished at the highest levels between the responsible dialogue. These two gentlemen, if not that I'm in the position of giving anybody advice, but I'll go ahead and do it.
Sure you are.
I'll go ahead and do it. They need to really listen to one another first before they start talking. You know, they really need to go into a room alone and say, you know, our objectives, you know, set their objectives, set some reasonable objectives, and then, you know, have frank exchanges about what bugs each of them about what each nation has done to the other. You know, in my discussions, which I have held now with many journalists around the world and interviews around the world, we don't understand in this country the long sweep of Russian history, the way you need to understand it. You can't start understanding Russia in 1917. You've got to go way back, centuries back. And you've got to understand how Russia evolved, the unique fears that Russia has about being invaded, the unique challenges that Russia has. I'm no expert on Russia, but I do know that, you know, and you know from your experience with Ukraine, it is simple folly to say that we should reflexively back the very same group that was happy to send people in to be prison guards, you know, during World War II under the Nazis. That is not a group of people who still are very powerful in Ukraine that any thinking American should be behind or trying to do crooked gas deals via their son, not to pick on Joe Biden. You know, so our policy with regard to the former Soviet Union and Central Europe has led to periods in the late 90s, 1990s, that were devastating for parts of Russia and the other former countries of the Soviet Union. And it really, when we think about it, we're 325 million, they're 140 million. You got India, 1.3 billion, China, 1.3 billion. You know, why are we two small countries in terms of population with vast expanses of land, vast energy, vast stores of water? You know, why are we at loggerheads while these other two gigantic countries could in a nanosecond go on a very dangerous course and attack each of us? Why are we doing this? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. Are we being set up here, you know, by very clever forces a la George Soros, financial speculators? Are we being set up to do this, to feed the defense industry, to feed suspect sources, you know, who are hoping that we don't notice the real enemy that rises from the Far East?
Yeah, I think you raise a good point about the cultural and historic differences between the United States and Russia. In my film career, I've traveled the world, and when I go places like China, Korea, you stand in the middle of Seoul or whatever, and it's very obvious that I'm the only white guy there, and so there's a cultural difference, there's a, you know, a difference that you can really feel. But I've been to Ukraine, and when you go there, you know, people were coming up to me and speaking Russian to me because I just look like everybody else looks there. And so I think that people dismiss the substantial differences between that society and our society. So you raise a good point. But that's being redundant to say that you raise a good point, Charles.
Well, thank you. Now, this is a piece I did with a more recent piece with Katya Blanova. And it's my belief, and I've been talking about this on the radio now with Patrice Lead for a while, putting my financial background and its perspectives into play here, and thinking about the politics at the same time, the resistance has failed, all right?
Yes.
The one argument that would win the day come November is if we had a crash, if we had a financial crash. Then, you know, people would be more inclined, as they were in 2008 when there was a crash, to say, you know what, we gave Trump a chance. He tried all these crazy things at once. Look at the crash. Now I can't retire. I lost my job. I've got this problem and that problem. It's easy to see why the leader of the resistance, and George Soros is one of those leaders, who has billions squirreled away, who knows how to bet against the success of countries, who made £1 billion betting against the UK in the 1990s, thereabouts. It's easy to imagine that group may be looking at this and saying, you know, we got to get rid of this Trump guy. We should have a crash. You have that idiot Bill Maher saying, you know, a nuclear war would be good.
Bill Maher said that?
A nuclear war or a crash, one of the others, would be good because, you know, that would help us get rid of Trump.
Jeez.
I mean, a crash is not a good idea, and yet a gigantic bubble has been inflated ever since 1998, 1999, and a crash is, you know, part of the normal expansion and contraction cycles of the economy going back over long periods of time. So a crash is something that could happen. This is an article that, though, talks about the degree to which the United States is actually relatively strong compared to China, compared to other places. And for those of you who are not all that conversant with economics, Katya did a great job retooling what I said into something that is relatively easy to understand.
Do you think that Bill Maher would be substantially affected by an economic crash, Charles, or would he probably continue to have a show on HBO and a lot of money?
He'd probably still be on HBO and a lot of money, but I hope he's given a lot of his money to the next Bernie Madoff group, as did happen to quite a few people in 2008. If we go back into the slide, we're almost done. There's a story here on the Mexican president. And I actually think so far the interactions between Donald Trump and this AMLO guy, who's going to be the next president of Mexico, so far they seem to be, you know, on a very cautionary basis. They seem to be polite. I really think it will be an excellent idea, given the instability that we see in Venezuela, a large country that used to be an important ally of the United States, Brazil, an even larger country that's on its ass and not doing well and not destined to recover anytime soon. The last thing we need on our southern border is a failed narco state. And, you know, this gentleman has been saying a whole bunch of things that got him elected, but that are very threatening. The notion that the Mexican government will no longer target the drug traffickers.
Why would they?
The notion that, well, supposedly some of the drug traffickers were big contributors. The notion that this man may encourage even more Mexicans to leave the country and come here. This is an urgent crisis that needs to be dealt with. I think in the end it's going to lead to resolution of both building the wall and achieving a fair and sensible immigration reform package. But some people look at this and say it's woe is me for Donald Trump. I actually think it's going to end up being good.
Well, you see, I had seen that this guy had said they were going to stop fighting drug trafficking, and it sounded absolutely absurd to me. And then somebody said, oh no, he's just being targeted by the press. But why? I mean, that seems like Mexico would immediately descend into chaos.
Mexico already is in chaos. I mean, prior to this election, a large number of political candidates were assassinated.
Oh my God.
And I have some personal knowledge of people in Mexico who tell me that there are portions of Mexico where it's lawless.
Yeah, I have no doubt.
Large
about
portions,
that.
big cities.
And it's a gigantic country.
Yeah, it's a shame to see it. So finally, at this point here, I checked this because I heard this and I was astounded that in 1986, when Reagan put up Antonin Scalia, who was certainly conservative in 1986, in 1986, Antonin Scalia, when he ultimately was voted on in the Senate, was confirmed 98-0. 98-0. Okay? There was a time when the Congress understood that it was advice and consent of the Senate. It's not, Donald Trump won and he doesn't get to appoint a Supreme Court justice. No, he won. He gets to appoint a Supreme Court justice, and you don't get to second guess him. You can determine whether the candidate is professionally qualified and has the required judicial temperament. Yes, you can do that, but you can't interpose yourself and say, no, Donald Trump doesn't have the right to do what he wants. That was what the election of 2016 was all about. And if you want to have a different result in the Supreme Court, as even Barack Obama said at one point in frustration, why don't you try winning some damn elections? It might have been a good idea, Hillary, instead of staying home in Crappie-Qua, and doing whatever you were doing there, other than going out and giving speeches and making appearances and presenting, credible plans that would excite the votership, the voters. Maybe you should have gone out and campaigned in those crucial states. Maybe you should have spent money in those states that you thought you had a lock on, or maybe you would just assume that the election in 2016 was rigged. So we've gone a little bit over time, but I thought it would be useful to take people through where I believe the tenor of the country is right now. I think the deplorables are rising and are standing up and saying, you tried to take the election away from us after it happened. You're not going to take Donald Trump's programs away from him. You're going to, the people who voted Donald Trump in, and I should remind people, I was not one of those people. I felt it was important that when I got involved in this controversy, that I be above reproach, that my focus is on charity fraud and righting this charity fraud. In the 2016 election, I was prepared to stand back and not vote. Now is a different story. Donald Trump has won fair and square. Donald Trump has been in office. We see what job of Hillary the Hutt, and what's this guy's name?
Salacious Crumb.
Is that really the name of that character?
That's the
Salacious
character,
Crumb?
yeah.
That's pretty funny. I remember the Salacious Crumb flying around.
Yeah.
So Hillary the Hutt seriously thinks that she has the right to just, tear up the election results, have her bratty daughter go around spouting the crap that she's been spouting about Donald Trump and about policies and about now her right maybe someday to occupy the White House.
No.
Yeah.
Her right. See, just listen to that. They think it's their right to occupy the White House. That is a privilege bestowed on an individual by the people of the United States. It's no one's right. Yeah. That's like king talk.
I know.
Royalty.
That's like crazy talk.
Absolutely terrible. Well, so Charles, that's all you've got for today?
That's all I've got. I got
That's
nothing.
quite a lot.
I got nothing.
Oh, no. That was good. I didn't mean to pose it that way. Well, thank you very much, Charles. I think everybody always appreciates these presentations. We've got over 1,020 people watching us on the Jason Goodman Crowdsource the Truth channel. We've got 135 with us on the 21st Century 3D channel. Of course, the 21st Century 3D channel offers people the opportunity to utilize Super Chat to sponsor us. And that's an experiment I'm just testing. People using Super Chat should be aware that 30% of that money goes to Google. And I've tried to avoid monetizing through giant corporations like that because I think they have enough money and I think they have a lot of power to suppress us if it starts to grow too much. So I don't want to rely on growing the organization too much through those types of things, but we definitely appreciate people who want to sponsor Crowdsource the Truth and want to give them as many opportunities to do that in any way that they choose, including going to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, where moving forward there will be some exclusive content available there. It's interesting, Charles. One program out of, I don't know how many videos are on Crowdsource the Truth, 900, 1,000, something like that. One program, and people started emailing me that, oh, you put information behind a paywall and it's going to collapse your organization. Well, the other thing that's going to collapse the organization is if I can't pay my bills and buy food. So definitely appreciate all those people who are sponsoring on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. You can also make a one-time sponsorship payment, paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. We are still utilizing cryptocurrency. If people want to use Bitcoin, they can just point their phone or their Bitcoin wallet device at that QR code right there and send some cryptocurrency our way. I want to thank Charles for another excellent Sunday with Charles. We will be back on Wednesday for Closing In. I apologize that my traveling schedule has precluded that for some time, but a lot of stuff happening this week. We expect Peter Strzok to testify in front of a House committee. Is it a House committee or a Senate committee?
I think it's a House committee, I think.
House committee. Still should
It
be
could
interesting.
Senate, I'm not sure.
Should be interesting to see him sort of squirm his way through that. Thanks everybody for watching. I'll be back tomorrow. We've got Larry Klayman on tomorrow at 2 o'clock.
Enjoy that.
See you then.